My name is Daniel Westbrook, and today we're working on a historic home that has some very proprietary siding. Now, the home was built in 1909, and we're going to go through the process of extracting the siding, making new siding, and installing the siding. Through the process, we're going to use a mixture of modern methods and historic methods in order to create this siding. Now, in the modern era, we have this thing called best practices. There is a standard way of installation for products that are modern. That's not always useful when incorporating older style technique, but there is a way to mold the two together in order to create a product that is still built to withstand. So I want to point out the damaged siding that's up here on the wall. What we need to do is come in and do some patchwork so that the house can be painted. And in order for us to do that, the first thing that we like to do is identify what needs to happen, how much material we need to make, and how we're going to extract this material. Now, this is a tongue and groove for flooring, and it's been beveled on the face. That's what gives you this beveled look, but essentially this is just a 3/4 inch thick material that's applied directly to the studs. One of the things about this, though, is that all of the trim work has to be installed on top of the siding, so it makes it a lot more difficult to pull out, and we're going to start pulling some of these pieces out next. Okay, I'm going to extract these pieces, and even though I'm not cutting and making dust, one of the modern day's best practices is to understand that when you're dealing with historic homes, you're dealing with lead. So there's a way to deal with lead, and that's why you want to wear the appropriate clothing. Okay, to extract these pieces, it's really just not any different than patching in, say, hardwood floor in your home, because that's essentially what this is. It's a tongue and groove. So a lot of times what I do, since I'm doing a whole bunch, I'll just take two pieces and extract them out kind of like that and pull them out. So you can see on this piece, I've essentially just split it and I've pulled it out. Now, I'm not taking the corner board off out here because that goes all the way up, and I've got enough room that I can just kind of extract this piece out without having to get into that. Okay, so now we're going to take our old pieces that we've taken off into the shop and get our shop set up to make our new siding. Okay, so here's the siding that we extracted off of the home, and we've set it up here so that we can view what we're doing. This was essentially, originally, a tongue and groove for flooring, which is exactly what we have right here. The face of these are beveled, and here's some finished pieces together to show you that it's been beveled down to the tongue. And when you put them together, they actually, even though they're tongue and groove, they look like a beveled siding. And we're gonna manufacture these next. Okay, so the first step is what I'm gonna do with this material is run it through the table saw. Now, I've set up the table saw so that there's a feather wedge here in order to keep the material against the fence, and I've set the saw blade at a bevel here in order to take the main meat off of our piece so that when we're running it through the planer, we only have to run it through the planer one time, and that saves planer knives. So we're going to run this through right now. Now I want to point out a couple of things here, is that the saw blade isn't going to cut it all the way through because it doesn't set high enough. So I've got to run it through the next table saw just to take this little slag of meat off. And I'm going to walk over to the next station, and that's our next step. So you can see, there's the rip. It's got saw marks on it, so it's ready to be run through the planer, and that's the next step. So the third step is to run the material through the planer. But I want to point out that we've made this little jig here, which is exactly at the bevel that we want, so that when we run the material through, the top of our material that needs to be planed is actually parallel with the planer blades, and we have it set just exactly so it's going to take off this little bit of material that you see right here to get it right down exactly where we want it. And that's where the consistency comes from, is dialing it in precisely. So we're going to cut this and run it through the planer next. And that's our final product right there. See how nice and smooth and consistent that is? All the pieces that we run through are going to be consistent, and it doesn't take fancy materials. As you can see, this is just a portable planer. It's going to give us enough material to do our patchwork on this historic home. Okay, so we're back in the field again, and we've set up our tools. And I want to point out another modern day best practice, and that is to pre-prime your material before you put them in. And that's exactly what we've done with our pieces here. Now all we have to do is measure, cut, and do our installation. We'll do that next. So what's happening here is that over the years, this siding has expanded and contracted, and the spacing is irregular. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can widen the space and tighten these pieces a little bit. If I can't do that, I'm going to take a little bit more off of the back of this and a little bit off of the top of this in order for these to sit together nicely. So sometimes there's a little bit of fussing with these. What I want to do is use a little piece here that I can use as a kind of a beater block. See if I can get a little more space out of it. Okay, so installing a proprietary siding like this on a historic home is a very custom approach for each piece, because the home is old and it has sagged in places, it's settled in places, the siding is expanded and contracted, so it's an approach that has to be custom. There's a lot of surface nails on a siding like this, and they're going directly into the studs, and so it is absolutely imperative to use a stainless steel nail. I know it's expensive, but it's the best that we can do, and so I'm simply going to nail it up into the meat of the wood, and we'll nail it here, and then the final thing to do is to reinstall our trim on the face, and I'm going to do that now. Okay, so I want to point out that our siding is nailed directly to the stud, so there's no vapor barrier behind it, no moisture barrier, I should say, behind it. So it's critical to back caulk our pieces so that we get adhesion, we get a way of keeping moisture out in some of the joints, and with expansion and contraction it'll stay a lot better together over time. So I believe in the modern era of best building practices. Using a mixture of historic and modern methods helped us to accomplish this fix today. My name is Daniel Westbrook. Talk to you soon.